Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet Podcast. I'm your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the true pleasure today to be joined by my good friend, Ryan Manion, and really excited to have Ryan on the podcast today. For those that may be not familiar with the MilVet and what we do, the MilVet is an executive platform that provides veterans an opportunity to get access to executive roles in venture capital, private equity, and founder-based companies. If you're interested in those types of roles, please check out TheMilVet.org. We have a brand new website up. You can check out all our podcasts. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can check out the roles that we have open right now. A lot going on in the MilVet world right now. So please check it out. And great to have you checking out our podcast today. But with that, I would love to turn it over to our guest today, Ryan, to talk about what she's doing these days. So Ryan, welcome to the show. Let us know what's going on these days.
Oh, Beau, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome. I love everything that you're doing with the MilVet community, and just an honor to be here with you today.
Awesome. No, it's great. And it's obviously, we have a long history and some stats, bittersweet in some ways, but a lot of great things we've done. Just give us a quick overview of what your current role is with the Travis Manion Foundation.
Sure. So I currently serve as the CEO of the Travis Manion Foundation. The organization was named after my brother, First Lieutenant Travis Manion, who was killed in Iraq in April of 2007. I think fun fact for the audience to know is that you were Travis's commanding officer at the time. So we have a very long history. I fell into this role not in a traditional way, as you know. This organization was started by my mom. We really saw it initially as a way, when I say we, my father and I really saw it as a way for my mom to really channel the grief after losing her only son. And we really didn't envision the Travis Manion Foundation being more than a local memorial fund that operated in the Philadelphia area where we live. And, here we are today approaching 20 years, and we are one of the largest veteran service organizations in the country.
It's amazing. And again, to have been part of the journey from when it was literally, an idea in your living room to one of the largest VSOs in the country is an amazing. And you be in charge of that is awesome. But it's hard to believe you had a life before the Travis Manion Foundation. And I think it's important, on this show, we usually talk to veterans that are transitioning and they've made a transition from one career to another. You had a pretty abrupt change in your life as well. I'd love to kind of talk about that. Like, what were you doing before you were known as the CEO of the Travis Manion Foundation? What was your life like? And I'd love to talk about that transition for you some.
Yeah, I think, also important to note, and I always talk about this within the military community. We talk about veteran transition, but there's also transition for families of the fallen, because just like veterans, like the identity that they once have or had is stripped away, right? And you think about military spouses that are being asked to, that are living on base and being told, you've got to leave. And so a lot of it is like the life that we once knew is different as well. And so, for me, my journey's a little unique. I graduated college in 2004, and I was very dead set on what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a small business owner. I had taken out small business loans before even graduating to open up a men's and women's clothing boutique. I opened my first boutique just months after graduating, and it was really successful, so successful that I was able to open up another location. And I did not see myself doing anything else in my life. I loved it. It was a passion for me. And in fact, I always joke, Travis was my biggest champion. And so he loved that I was so driven towards like a goal, and I had identified what I wanted to do. And I was doing it, and I was successful doing it. And, after he was killed, again, the Travis Manion Foundation was not in a place where we had a bunch of employees. It was my mom. And uh, I remember one day I was in my new location that we had just opened, and I had just gotten a delivery. And, for those in the boutique industry and space, clothing industry, I had gotten a line that was very exclusive to get. And 6 months prior, this would have been one of the biggest accomplishments I had made within this industry. And I remember opening up the clothes and this specific line to start hanging on the racks, and I felt nothing. And it was at that moment that I kind of knew, like, okay, I can't do this. Like, this is not bringing me any purpose or passion in my life. And so I ended up selling both of my businesses. And then I had to decide, well, what am I doing next? I thought about this idea that I wanted to be more service minded. And for me, that ended me up joining the government. So I was working for HUD, delivering community block grants outside of Philadelphia. I thought in my 27-year-old brain that joining the government meant you were being of service to your country, and of course you are, but it was empty for me. And I worked there for about 2 years, and then it was at that point that the Travis Manion Foundation was growing. And I joined alongside my mom. We had about 5 employees at the time, and it was this big leap of faith for me, because of course it didn't feel like the path that I was going to take. And joining the Travis Manion Foundation, I always say, like, I worked there for about a year until my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she died less than a year after that. So I had a very short stint where I was working alongside my mom, but I didn't have an official role at the foundation. We didn't really have official roles. It was like my mom was in charge, and we all just worked with her to do what we were doing. But we didn't have set programs at the time. We were really more of a grant giving organization at that point. And 2 weeks after my mom died of cancer, our board of directors told me, "You're now in charge. You are the executive director of this organization." And I have never, ever felt more pressure with anything in my life, because all I could think about was that my mom had built this organization. And at the time, we were starting to grow and become more well known. And I thought, wow, I have these tremendous shoes to fill in continuing what my mom has built. But not only that, it was an organization that bared my brother's name. So that was perhaps the hardest professional time in my life, just trying to understand what I needed to do. I didn't understand the nonprofit world. And everyone, I often have people say, well, how did you learn the ins and outs of the nonprofit industry? And I'm very candid. I went to Barnes and Noble and I bought Nonprofit 101 for Dummies. And I put it on my nightstand, and every night I read part of that book. And what I really found, like, yeah, there are different regulations from a government perspective and IRS perspective that you have to adhere by running a 501c3. But in a lot of ways, what I realized is that I was just running a business. And that's how I had to adapt and treat it as such. And I got some really great advice early on from one of our board members. He was the former chairman of Johnson and Johnson. And I remember going to him and saying, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't feel smart enough. I don't feel well equipped enough. I feel like not only am I trying to run a 501c3, but it's in the military space. And I said, what guidance can you offer me? And he said, hire really smart people. And it was the best piece of advice that I ever got because it flipped the switch on it all being about depending on me and me depending on others to help me move forward with what we were trying to accomplish. And every day since, every time I'm hiring someone, I'm always looking at like, yep, they're smarter than me. I'm bringing them on. And I now have over 100 employees and they're all smarter than me. And that's why the Travis Manion Foundation is so incredibly successful.
It's an amazing story. There's so much there to unpack, and I want to hit on a few things. I mean, one, I think, is the sense that you had, and that so many veterans have, of imposter syndrome. It's like,
Mm,
well, I don't belong, and as you transition from one role to another, as you transition from corporate America, in your own business to running this nonprofit in the veteran space. And obviously, you're not a veteran, although you're super connected. And you grew up as your dad's a Marine. I mean, you're part of it, but you're not in it, right? You're not in the club, and now
yeah.
you're in charge of something that's in the club. I'm sure you felt like an imposter in some ways, which you shouldn't, but you can't help it. It's just part of the deal, right? I
I will actually say that was perhaps my biggest challenge. Um, you're very connected in the VSO world, and I would say 99.9% of veteran service organizations are run by male veterans,
Yep.
and I was neither. And so I had a tremendous bout of imposter syndrome. And I think when I look back on it, I think that that was more self-imposed than people not actually respecting me in that position. And so that was a big hurdle for me in terms of like my belief in myself. And I really had to work hard in proving not to others but to myself that I was worthy of being in this position and having this role for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, see, I feel like, having been in the space for a while, that you would have, and I know you were, accepted into the space by others, but it's you're making a false barrier. Again, that's why it's called imposter syndrome, and that's
Yeah.
why so many veterans feel it. Right? They're leaving the military behind, and I make this analogy all the time for a veteran leaving service. It's like the Shawshank Redemption, right? You know your place inside the confines of the walls. You know what you can do, and you know how to get things done. You know your rank, you know how you fit in. And when that's all stripped away and you're out there by yourself, and no one, and there's no rank anymore, there's no uniform, you're like, well, they're going to find out that I can't, and you can do it. You can 100% be successful in the civilian world. It's not that different, but you make this thing that it's like so different, and people aren't going to respect me, and I don't have the right college degree, or I haven't done the right thing, or they think I'm a knuckle dragging idiot because I was in the Marine Corps and eating crayon. I mean, that's the perception. It's not the reality, but you build this wall up inside of you that is so often the biggest challenge that veterans have, right? I mean, they would much rather charge a machine gun than go
Yeah.
on an interview, right? Than talk to somebody. I mean, it's just crazy, but that's just how it is, because they're comfortable in that setting of charging a machine gun, whereas putting on a suit and talking to someone is like, oh, it's just not me, right? But you can do it. You have to you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And you have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and it just takes time. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think also it's like a mindset shift. I started to realize, and I'll share a very quick story with you. Very early on, after I took over leading the organization, I was invited to a roundtable at the White House, and the invite that came in said, "Mr. Ryan Manion." Yeah, I have an androgynous name, so and I thought, okay, well, I got the invite, I'm going, and I got to the White House, and I walked up to the door, and we were in one of the rooms with a big conference table, and they had the name placards for the different leaders at the table, and then they had a row of chairs in the back, and that was where people's executive assistants were sitting. And I walked up and a gentleman greeted me at the door. And immediately he said, "You can take a seat at any of the chairs against the wall." And so I looked at him and I said, "Well, okay." I said, "But that's my name right there." And he was very apologetic. And he said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. We'll have it said Mr. Ryan Manion, they scratched it out and put Miss." And I said, "No problem." And I sat at that table and I was the only woman at that table. And I stayed very quiet the entire time. And it was all the big six: VFW, American Legion, DAV. And we were talking about policies and different issues that were affecting our veterans. And I stayed very quiet. And then at the end, I really started talking about the holistic approach we take at Travis Manion Foundation and the role that plays in veterans' mental health. And I saw these like collective nods around the room. And afterwards, people were coming up and, "We want to learn more. We love what you're doing." And I walked out, and the gentleman who had kind of misgendered me and told me to sit against the wall, he did a mea culpa and said, I want to apologize again." I said, "Oh my gosh, no problem. I get it. It's been a common mistake my whole life." And when I walked out of the White House that day, that was like a really pivotal moment for me, where in my head, I realized that like my belief in myself is vastly more important than anyone else's belief in me. And I remember kind of just drawing this imaginary line on the ground, and I'm like, I'm stepping over this line, and I'm going to believe I'm going to believe it till I become it. Like I may not be there yet, but like I am going to believe that I am. And then one day the flip just switches and you're like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I have no imposter syndrome at all anymore. And it just happens. But that's in your mind. Like you
Yeah.
have to make that decision. No one's going to make it for you, you know?
Well, I love that. And again, I have this conversation with a lot of veterans that are getting out and want to get into the private equity world or banking world or
Hmm.
consulting world, because typically, if you're getting out of the military and you've done 5, 8 years, maybe you're 30 years old when you're joining the workforce, right? Just call it 30 years old.
Yeah.
And your peers at this company, called a Goldman Sachs or whatever, at a McKinsey, they got in there at age 22 and they've been building the experience. And all of a sudden, you're like, well, how can I compete with these guys? They've been doing it for 8 years. I'm like, no, but you've been doing some pretty cool stuff. Now it's different, right? You don't have maybe all the experience in that exact field, but what you have is super valuable. You just don't know how. I mean, yes, there's going to be a learning curve. I'm not saying you have to work really hard,
Sure.
but you do belong there and you can catch up and you bring other things that those people don't have that are 22 that have been working in that field for 8 years, because you've been leading people and making decisions and living in, chaos. And you have that to bring to the table. Plus, you can add on, you can learn how to read a P&L. You can't
Yeah.
learn to lead like that. So I think it's a mindset shift that you talk about, and it's very, very important. Again, I talk to a lot of folks all the time that it takes them a while to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, and I think it's all about like how you shape your perspective on your experience. Like what I realized is, in my specific situation is, yeah, I wasn't a veteran, but I was a military child. I was a Gold Star sister. I'm now a military parent. Like I brought a different perspective to the table that like veterans, like that 22-year-old kid does not have the perspective that you have. And that perspective is so incredibly, it's invaluable. Like it
Yep.
is there's no comparing to that. And frankly, that's why a lot of people want to hire veterans. Listen, we're a VSO, and every one of our job applications that go out when we're trying to hire, it will say veteran preferred at the bottom, because we completely understand the value that a veteran brings to the table over, frankly, over a civilian. We just do. Like I know that I can teach someone how to learn Salesforce and our database. So I'm going to always choose that veteran that says, I don't know what Salesforce is, over the perfect person that says, I've been working in nonprofit for 10 years and I know every database that you're using. If I'm looking at that veteran and I'm seeing those um, intangible leadership skill sets, I'm going to go with them 100 times over.
Yeah, and again, it goes to the point of what the MilVet does, right? You hire the best people, hire people that are smarter than you. I mean,
Yeah.
that is how companies become successful. That's how the Travis Manion Foundation and so many companies, you hire people that are smarter than you. And again, I think that's what we try to do at the MilVet, right? Is to provide that talent, to get those veterans out there that bring, I think the unique thing about what the MilVet is able to do is, right, we take folks that have that blue collar leadership, able to lead, and call it the hourly workforce, to lead NCOs into combat, right? But they can also talk to generals. So you can talk to the board, you can talk to the staff and the white collar force, but you can lead down, you can lead up. All those things those are skills that I think a lot of people don't appreciate they have when they leave the military. And you add on that the MBA, which you can do, and then okay, now I have the hard skill plus all those soft leadership skills. That is something that is invaluable to the workforce. That's what we try to provide. And again, that's one of the things we do with the MilVet. Not only are we placing folks in the PE and VC space, but we've done searches for executives in the nonprofit space as well, which is pretty cool. So I mean, it's important to have that ability and to translate that over certainly. And I think that's something I'd love to you, and you hit on it a little bit, but is it fair to say, I mean, you mentioned a little bit, but the difference between running a nonprofit and running a commercially for-profit business, there's not much different. I mean, there's some regulations, but really at the end of the day, it's a business. I mean, whether at the end of the day, right?
It is 1000% a business. I would argue to say it's a bit harder because there are certain things that no one's looking at how every cent of a dollar goes into things in a business in the same way that they are in, you've got to grow the business, but you've got to make sure that you're not spending too much on fundraising or marketing, that it's going back directly to your programs and your work like that. So it teaches you to be I would say that nonprofit teaches you to be very vigilant in terms of how you're spending every dollar. That's super important. But at the end of the day, we have the same job. We've got to raise money. You've got to do those raises. You've got to make sure that most importantly, you have a product, and that is the programs that we offer to veterans, that you have a product that is proven successful and that works. And you've got to make sure that you've got the right talent to get the job done.
Yeah. And I think it's a great segue into let's talk about the product. And again, I'm obviously very aware of what TMF does, but for the audience out there, I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about what the whole Travis Manion Foundation started as, and kind of what it's what it has become, because there's so many. It's always adding something new, which is to me just fantastic. But I mean, and this being the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which is crazy. I know I want to talk a little bit about the 9/11 runs in particular, but I mean, how do you describe what Travis Manion Foundation does? And I mean, I'd love to talk through all the programs a little bit for our audience, really to share how people, because again, I think in our audience, a lot of the people that are transitioning are going to be looking for ways to find that purpose. And again, business world is great, but if you're going to find a hole that's out there just being in corporate America, and things like TMF, certainly for me, have been able to fill that hole. So I'd love for you to kind of go through maybe the list a little bit and kind of talk about them all if we can.
Yeah. I mean, I think, when, and I always say that, like, it is a needle in a haystack where you're going to find a job that brings you that fulfilled internal purpose as well, right? And so you have to look for opportunities outside of that to fill that bucket of all the things, frankly, that you miss when you leave the military. And so if you look at the Travis Manion Foundation from, the 100,000 foot view, I say we're a community. And that's the beauty in what TMF is. We are a community, and what we do is we invest in veterans and families of the fallen for them to go out and serve in their local communities. And they do that in so many different ways. And in that investment piece, we have a lot of different things. We have transition programs. We have leadership, 7-month experiential leadership programs. We've got a lot of ways in which we invest in veterans to get them to the place where then they can go out and be a part of the greater good and find those things, those again intangible things that they miss when leaving the military, that camaraderie, that sense of being part of something bigger than themselves. And we give that back to them by saying, we need you to go out and we need you to show up as civic assets in your own backyards. How do they do that? Our flagship program is called Character Does Matter. And we actually train veterans to go out and mentor our next generation. We've had close to 1 million young adults who have gone through the program and have thousands of veterans across the country who have been trained to deliver character education to our youth. We have large scale activations like the 9/11 Heroes Run, where we have and execute over 90 5Ks around September 11th. And it's funny because a lot of times people will say, well, is that your big fundraising initiative? And I always say a 5K run is perhaps the worst fundraising idea ever. It's a logistical nightmare. But what we do is that we galvanize communities across the country. We have close to 100,000 people every year that come out to their local communities, and the run is just, the caveat of what we offer to bring them out, but it's so much more than that, right? It's about how do we make sure that towns and cities across the country every year never forget what happened on 9/11. Beau, you serve as a race director. You've been doing it for years. You know that feeling when those people come out. It's not about the 5K race. Like that is nothing compared to what the day itself represents for us.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to some of this from a personal level. As someone that's a Character Does Matter mentor, for anyone that's interested, it's a great program where the foundation provides you kind of the structure of what you present in the classroom, and you go out there and you're talking to kids, and it can be I've talked to first graders, I think up to high schoolers, and about character and about really just being a good example of what right looks like, and sharing examples of people that are their age, that are teenagers and younger kids that have done so much and made an impact, and sharing those stories and hopefully inspiring them to be, representatives of what character looks like in their neighborhood. It's great when you get the conversation going, especially the little kids, and talk about things like just say something nice to your friend. They're like the little kids are. I mean, this fires me up when I get in the classroom and talk to those guys.
The thing, Beau, too, one of the things that we have found is that, and we track our Character Does Matter mentors. We track all of the different engagements and activations we have. And one of the things that we have found is that veterans who participate in our CDM program, who are trained to deliver this character course to kids, their mental health scores are vastly higher than the average veteran. And that is because they are, we're saying to veterans, like, you've taken off your uniform, we still need you to serve. And I think that's important, because you don't want that identity being stripped away from you.
100%. And I always say that when you give back like that, you get way more out of it in return, right?
Totally.
If you give this much, I get back that much,
Yeah.
So any of those opportunities, and I love the CDM program, certainly. And you talked about the 9/11 runs. I mean, it's hard to believe this year's the 25th anniversary of September 11th, right? And there'll be runs all over the country. I'm the race director for a run, and you're right. I mean, what we talk about all the time is it's about the race. The 5K is fine, but it's talking about bringing the community together to remember 9/11. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
big deal. Like most of the people that are, 25 years ago, most of the kids that are, I have a high schooler that helps me as my co-racer. He wasn't even born on 9/11, right? So
Yeah.
it's important for us to talk about that. And not only 9/11, but I always talk about, the feeling of 9/12 and what this
Yep.
country felt like, being united and bringing, over for a cause. And that's such a great, reason to bring the community together, obviously, is amazing. Obviously, the Honor Project, with, bringing folks out and going into cemeteries, U.S. cemeteries, and cleaning them up and remembering the fallen out there. I mean, it's such a great way to give back. And I think the point that you made about community, though, is so spot on. This is one of the things I really love about being part of TMF is that you're only limited by your imagination. If you're a veteran in, Paducah, Kentucky, and you want to go do something that brings the community together, TMF is going to mail you some T-shirts, and they're going to pay for you to get some supplies, and you can go do a little project, and you can have a 10-person group get together and go do something cool out there, and it's going to be awesome, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
is pretty cool. It's like, there's some structure, but it's like, hey, your community better. Travis Manion Foundation doesn't know what's going on in every community around the country. We defer to you, the local veteran, to figure out what your community needs, how you can give back. If you need some resources, they're going to provide it. That really is, to me, that idea of, hey, we want you as that local community leader to find something that's going to bring your community together. And that's, the kernel that kind of, spurs other growth. And it's just so much fun to watch that and see that grow. It's been amazing. It's really cool.
Yeah, we definitely take a bottoms up approach in the way that we operate as an organization. And, I mean, I didn't even touch on the fact of last year, we had thousands of service projects across the country, all led by veterans, and this is happening day in and day out. We have over 60 chapters across the country. So for the most part, there is a location near you. And if there's not, you can start one yourself, and that is the way that we operate. And I think, what I love is seeing the relationships that are formed and continue to form through TMF with the veteran community, and that people feel such pride in being a member of TMF and a part of everything that we're doing. Like, that just means everything to me.
I love it. No, it's great. Like, I'm a proud member for sure. And we're coming to a close, I know, here. And I guess I would, if folks want to learn more, website is travismanionfoundation.org.
travismanion.org. And the best thing you can do is hop on our website and click join the mission. It's as simple as that. Sign up, you put in your location, and someone will be in touch with you and share more about the opportunities that exist.
That's awesome. Well, hey, thank you, Ryan, for the time today. I really appreciate your transition story, because you have one too. We all have them. I think yours is super relatable, though, from going from the corporate America and your own little startup to being the CEO of probably one of the biggest nonprofits in America. It's an amazing story, and it's something that I think all of our audience can learn from. I appreciate the time. And if you're a veteran out there looking for an organization or looking to get something started in your community, there is nothing better, I can assure you, than the Travis Manion Foundation to get that started. So thanks again, Ryan. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Beau.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram @TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@TheMilVet.org. Thank you so much and take care.